Well, let's dive into our the big news in the water heating world from last month. Chris is kind enough to join us again to give us an update on the new water heating standards from the Department of Energy. And if I could just ask, Chris, we're seeing your Chris Mellon, we're seeing your screen. It looks like your camera's turned on. It's a little distracting. If you could turn off your camera, that would be great. Thanks so much, Chris Mellon. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Chris. Chris Granda.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Yep, good. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we're going to take a quick tour through the new water heater standard and what it means for heat pump water heaters. And first of all, just a quick introduction. I am the strategic lead for water heating for the California Investor-Owned Utilities Consultant Group. And I'm a senior fellow at Energy Solutions. And in addition to the bullets on this slide here, I think the things that make us a little unique is that we work not only delivering energy efficiency programs, but we also are very involved in the standard setting processes at both at the federal level and at state levels, primarily in California, but more and more in other states as well. So moving right along, the rulemaking process that just resulted in a new consumer water heater standard has been going on for a while. The request for information for that, which is the kickoff for these processes, came out 4 years ago. And it's going to be a while before we actually see the new standards kicking in too, because this was actually written into the enabling legislation. There's a 5-year gap between when the final rule for consumer water heaters comes out and the compliance date. So the things that there's really a 9-year stretch of time between when the process started and when the standards will finally come into effect in May of 2029. But, you know, that's probably not a bad thing given how consequential these standards are. So let's look at some of those high-level changes. There will be a minimum universal energy factor of at least 2.3 required for electric storage water heaters of greater than 35 gallons and less than 120 gallons of effective volume. Now, I'll talk about effective volume in a little bit, because that's a difference not just in the scope of water heaters, of electric water heaters that will be required to be heat pump level efficiency, but also a different metric as well. And we'll talk about how that, what the combined effect of that will be. Now, in 2015, there was a similar kind of a component to the standard that's in place now, and DOE projected at that time that 9% of the electric storage water heaters would be heat pump water heaters in 2015 when that kicked in. That did not happen. DOE is now projecting that 61% of electric storage water heaters shipped annually will use heat pumps after 2030. And it seems like there's a better chance this time around of the standard having the desired impact, and I'll get to that in just a second. Now, the new standard doesn't really increase the efficiency of heat pump water heaters very much. It's slightly increased, but it just mostly has its impact by expanding the range dramatically. And that 61% of electric storage water heaters in 2030, we estimate, is going to correspond to annual shipments of around 3 million heat pump water heaters a year. That's compared to under 200,000, we think, in 2023. So we're talking about a really big shift over a 5-year period. Now, on the gas side, gas storage water heaters also increased efficiency, but below the condensing level, so some savings there, but not much. Gas-fired instantaneous standards were left open, and that doesn't mean that so they haven't changed, but DOE is about to pick them up, we think, again, and issue a standard for that one product class later on. Now, why do we think that this time around might have a bigger impact on the electric storage water heaters moving towards heat pumps than last time? And it's because DOE really took care to find out why the past standard hadn't had the desired impact, and address those problems in this rulemaking. The end result, if this standard has the expected effect, is going to be 17.6 quadrillion BTUs of savings over a 30-year lifespan. That would make it the most consequential DOE energy efficiency standard ever issued. So let's talk a little bit more about the that new metric and about what that actually means on the ground. So on the left, what you see is the largest electric resistance water heater that's currently legal. And by largest, I mean the one that's able to deliver the highest volume of hot water. And that is a 55 gallon rated volume. And I've just used the A.O. Smith one as an example. It's not, it'd be anyone similar to this one. And that has a UEF of 0.93 and delivers 55 gallons of 125 Fahrenheit hot water. Now, one of the reasons that DOE found that that the standard was not so effective is that if you heat the water in this water heater up to 150 degrees, and as you take it out of there, you combine it with cold water to mix it down to 120 degrees again, you get the equivalent of 74 gallons of 125 degree hot water. And this is an example of how technology can change the effectiveness of standards, because in this case, the technology is the thermostatic mixing valve. So what that does is, without electricity and without much attention, a thermostatic mixing valve can reliably over time take two sources of water at different temperatures and mix them to have the desired output temperature. And that has really changed everything in the water heating world. The way I think about it is, just as we had to adjust to thinking for lighting in terms of lumens instead of watts, because I'm old enough to remember when the only thing on a light bulb package was the wattage rating for the bulb, and you bought your light bulb based on what that rating was, 40 watts, 60 watts, 75 watts. But then we had CFLs and then LEDs, and with each more increasing level of efficiency, that wattage number meant less and less, and the lumens number was the one that we really need to pay attention to. And with water heaters, it's similar. We have a proxy for the amount of hot water you actually get at the tap in terms of the rated volume of the tank, but that rated volume means less and less now that we've got thermostatic mixing valves. So on the right here, let's take a look at what the biggest electric resistance water heater is going to be in 2030 under the new standard. So under effective volume, that's a new metric that takes the rated volume and the maximum set point temperature of the water heater into account. And with the effective volume, the largest electric resistance water heater that will be allowable is one that's rated at 35 gallons and has a maximum set point temperature of 135 degrees. And so that means that the effective volume of that tank is 42 gallons, substantially less than than what is allowable today. And that leaves a larger section of the market for heat pump water heaters. So anything above that effective volume level is going to need to be a heat pump water heater. And as we know, the most popular size for electric storage water heaters today is 50 gallons of rated volume. So we're talking about over 60% of the market. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, the DOE left the instantaneous tankless gas water heaters out of this rule, of this final rule, but our understanding is that they're going to pick that up in a separate rulemaking starting soon. And I'm mentioning it here because tankless is really coming on strong in a way that we hadn't recognized so much before. In California, 8% of homes have whole house tankless systems, and the national numbers based on recent market research that we purchased shows that they're growing at around 9% per year, which is compared to about 3.3% per year growth for all residential water heaters as a whole. So that's an interesting change that's been going on for a while. What we're looking into now is whether there's a similar change in the electric tankless area. And why that's important is that the electric tankless water heaters could be a way that an alternative to heat pump water heaters if they come down in price enough, and if in that case it's really the installation costs that are the thing that are holding it back. So I think I want to talk a little bit now about the interaction between the federal standard and some things that are happening just in California state and why we should care about that. So water heaters, it's about 50-50 across the US. There's slightly more electric water heaters now, I believe, than gas water heaters, if you look at the most recent DOE data. But there's some states that have a lot more of one than the other, and California is an extreme in the number of gas water heaters that it has. So it has about 10 million gas water heaters and somewhere between 2 and 3 million electric water heaters, depending on who you talk to. And then the other states that have a lot of gas water heaters are Texas, mostly because Texas has just a lot of water heaters, period. And New York and some other sort of northeastern states that were and where that's a more historic thing. But so what happens with the federal standard is that it's not an electrification standard. It really focuses on increasing the efficiency of electric water heaters. So then the question becomes, is there something else that would tend to cause fuel switching between gas to electric? And here I want to talk about California specifically, because those 10 million gas water heaters may be shifting to electric water heaters in that same 2030 timeframe that the federal standard is going to kick in. So what we have now are and sorry for the acronyms here. The first one is South Coast Air Quality Management District, then the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and the California Air Resources Board. The first two have already issued draft standards to require zero NOx emitting appliances. And that would include gas water heaters in their service territories, which are around the biggest cities in California, the Bay Area generally, and the greater Los Angeles area. So those two air quality management districts alone, I believe, cover something like 40 to 50% of households in California. California Air Resources Board has announced that they have in the works a zero carbon emission standard, so a zero greenhouse gas emission standard that would cover pretty much the entire state. The CARB standard is coming on a little behind the other two air quality management districts, but it's these complement building codes that are already in place that strongly encourage electric water heating in new construction. So in that 2030 timeframe, I think we will start to see the wholesale transition of California residential water heating from gas to electric, and that will happen at the pace of sort of natural retirement of equipment. Storage gas water heaters last about 13 years, and tankless gas water heaters we think last around 20 years. So what does that look like when you take the effect of these standards in a very big state like California that has a very large amount of gas water heaters, and then put that in with the national numbers? We think that it looks something like this. So we took this back to 2020 to give you an idea of, again, we've got about a half and half split here between gas and electric water heaters. with the tankless gas showing up at the bottom of that lighter blue band, slightly increasing over time. But then when you get to 2030, and the gold in the middle is our heat pump water heaters. Still, very few of them, relatively speaking, in the market through today. But beginning to increase. And then when the standard kicks in 2030, then we really start to see the changes happening. And as we go out, we see on a national level a decrease in electric resistance water heaters, the dark blue on top, but they don't go away because if DOE's standard behaves exactly the way that they think it will, and of course it won't, but let's say it's close, there's still going to be plenty of electric resistance water heaters out there, but they will be outnumbered by the heat pump water heaters. And there'll be a decreasing share of gas water heaters of both types going into the future. And that reflects both what happens in California and a slight electrification trend that's already in place nationally for water heaters. So that's just a first take on what the future looks like. It will almost certainly be somewhat different than that, but we're trying just to put together some trends and what the data look like to us. But thank you very much. And take any questions now, Joe, or should we do the?
I think we should, if folks do have questions, just because we've got a packed agenda today, if they could put them in the chat for Chris and he can respond there, that'd be fantastic. And Chris, I just was going to say, one, it'd be fantastic to see if the future was a lot more yellow and faster yellow than that great slide. But also, have you and maybe a question for, well, just briefly answer that. Have you thought about doing a projection of like sales? This is like the stock of water heaters, what sales will look like starting in 2030 and what the heat pump water heater market will.
That would be a different slide, but if DOE's projections are correct, it'll be moving. It'll be a discontinuity, right? Because I think even with the natural growth that we've seen, heat pump water heaters, I would be surprised if they reach 1 million a year by 2030. It'd be great if they did, but then they'll be more like 3 million a year starting in 2030 by the way that the standard is structured.
So a huge jump. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah. So if folks have questions for that fantastic presentation and walk through the new DOE water heating standards, please put them in the chat for Chris. And huge thanks, Chris, for being on today.